Councillors, first may I have a motion to approve the agenda has been circulated, please. Councillor Maracas, thank you. Councillor Puri, second. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof, please. Seeing none. Before we get into the public planning applications, there's a statement I read. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and to obtain public input regarding the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendments. No decisions will be made tonight on either of the items which are before us. For each planning application that will be considered by council tonight, the following will occur. Town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application being considered. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues raised in the staff report or public concerns which have already been filed. Following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns at the podium up here respecting the proposal. And when we've gone through the audience once with respect to an application, I'll ask either the proponent or staff to address the questions or concerns. Once we've heard from members of the public, we close the public portion of the meeting. I then open it up to members of council to ask their questions of the proponent. It should also be noted that it should be noted that a comprehensive report will be prepared and presented to a future general committee meeting, assessing the merits of the application before us and providing council with a recommendation for consideration. It's very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning application. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms and give it to Linda, who's sitting at the front there. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Municipal Board. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to the council adopting an amendment. The Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. The public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the deputy clerk to confirm that notification to the public has occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Respecting item 1, application for official plan amendment, Minister of Infrastructure, Ontario, 50 Bloomington Road West, file number OPA-2016-06. On April 6, 2017, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. A notice of public planning meeting sign was also posted on the 2 street frontages of the subject lands. Respecting item 2, applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, 1754260 Ontario Limited, Polo Club, 15286 and 15306 Leslie Street, part of Lot 21, Concession 2, file numbers OPA-2016-03 and ZBA-2016-07. A notice of public planning meeting was given to all interested parties. Public meeting notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Building Services to begin with the presentations. Mr. Mino.
Mr. Mayor, we have our Manager of Development Planning, Glenn Lentman, will provide a brief overview of the application. And for the applicant, Ms. Amy Shepard from the IBI Group is here to speak to the application. Glenn?
Good evening. This evening's public planning meeting is with respect to an official plan amendment as submitted by the Minister of Infrastructure, Ontario, I.O., with respect to lands at 50 Bloomington Road, file number OPA 2016-06. The application is for an official plan amendment to amend the Yonge Street South Secondary Plan, Official Plan Amendment Number 34, by redesignating the portions of the easterly 13.3 hectare parcel of land from major institution and minor institution to cluster residential, which would be a 4.4 hectare parcel, special policy area, which would be a 3.2 hectare parcel, and to enlarge the environmental function area, which would total approximately 5.7 hectares. The subject lands are located at the northwest corner of Yonge Street and Bloomington Road. They comprise, as I mentioned, a total area of 13.3 hectares. This is an aerial photograph identifying the location of the subject lands, with noting Yonge Street to the east, Bloomington Road to the south. The lands have a frontage on Bloomington Road of 120 meters and frontage on Yonge Street of approximately 275 meters. This is a similar air photo which identifies the owner's entire land holdings, which represents approximately 74 hectares in total. Pardon me, 74 acres in total. You can see from it the lands that they have identified within their submission. The lands that we are referring to is identified in the red hatching, which is the eastern parcel. The lands to the west they identify as a north-central parcel, and of course they're a western parcel. The surrounding land uses on the subject lands are to the west, which is Cardinal Carter High School, the York Catholic District School Board. Further west to the north in that small little triangular section, also part of the owner's lands, is an office building operated by primarily an OPP detachment. Further north, that long sliver in an east-west direction is identified as Monk's Walk. North of these lands, along Elderberry Trail, is single detached residential. The lands directly north of these lands, that we have an application currently submitted by a group called Parcel Development for residential and commercial development. I'm sorry that doesn't show the lands to the east, but across the road there is a nursing home facility, and of course the lands south of Bloomington Side Road are lands within Richmond Hill, which are used for residential detached purposes. The existing official plan, the subject lands are currently designated major institution, minor institution, and environmental function area. As I mentioned, that's all part of the Yonge Street South Secondary Plan. The two institutional designations currently permit such uses as high school, school board offices, government administrative offices, a driver's testing center, the OPP headquarters, open space, places of worship, and daycares. The environmental function area is a designation which does not have the same level of environmental issues as an environmental protection area, but nonetheless has a environmental significance and is intended to primarily protect the adjoining ecological functions and environmental protection areas. OPA 34 also provides additional policies which include heritage policies and trail policies. This is a land use schedule which identifies the land use designations within OPA 34. The subject lands are identified in red. So you can see the primary designation on the lands as currently identified in diagrammatic form are minor institution and major institution, and that area in the central portion is the environmental function area. Also part of our official plan, I've identified this, which simply shows the trails plan, which is an east-west connection as part of the future trail route, diagrammatically shown, of course, through the Monk's Walk, and there's also a north-south connection which connects the Monk's Walk down to Bloomington Road. The existing zoning on the lands are currently zoned institutional under the provisions of the current bylaw, zoning bylaw 2213-78. It is noted that there is no application before council for consideration of any zoning bylaw amendment application. This is a map which simply identifies the zoning of the overall lands. You can see the institutional zoning which applies across all the properties. The proposal that has been submitted by IO is an official plan designation which would allow up to 148 residential units to be developed on that easterly portion of the lands, and would also include policies for the continued permissions for the government institutional offices. The residential development as proposed averages approximately 11 units per hectare over the subject land area, and 5 units per hectare over the entire 30-hectare Infrastructure Ontario property. The intention is to develop in a cluster residential format. I know the applicant will go over some of those concept plans. As I mentioned, there is no development plans that have been proposed at this time. We do not have any development applications before the town at this time. Should the lands be deemed surplus by the province and sold, it would be up to future landowners to develop the lands and bring any development applications forward to council and receive all planning permissions required through approval by this council. We do not know what they would represent, but they would, for an example, be either a plan of subdivision, certainly a rezoning, site plan, and condominium if that's the form of development that would proceed. The proposed official plan, the special policy area which is proposed as part of this area could accommodate a portion of those 148 units subject to further environmental review as outlined within the forthcoming official plan amendment. As I mentioned, 3 concept plans have been prepared to illustrate the possible site development of the subject lands. This is the proposed land use schedule that would be approved as part of the official plan amendment application. The yellow area was shown as cluster residential. It's currently shown as major and minor institution at this time, so that would be the development area. The area shown as white within that area would be the special policy area. So those lands could be developed subject to further environmental evaluation. And the area shown in green is the environmental function area, which is an expansion of the existing environmental function area. Staff apologizes for the tones that are shown on there. They can be confusing in terms of what they show, but the balance of the lands are zoned as major and minor institution. There would also be an amendment to, the applicant proposes at least an amendment to the a schedule to the official plan which identifies a block plan development for the area. Currently there are 6 block plans within OPA 34. The official plan requires that block plans be developed and presented to council prior to any development on the lands, and that's what's proposed by the applicant. The concept plans proposed that have been at least submitted for illustrative purposes have been shown. This identifies access both onto Yonge Street and onto Bloomington Side Road, built in a cluster format. The existing office building to the north would be retained, and the balance of the lands would be developed in the fashion shown here, which would be ground-related housing to the west and an apartment building format in this particular plan would show underground parking. The second proposal illustrates the retention of the existing De La Salle College on the property for future residential use, and the balance of the lands would be retained for ground-related residential. And the third option would propose to eliminate the De La Salle College building on the lands and develop the balance of the lands for residential. This plan does not illustrate the lands to the west, which is the special policy area lands. And as I mentioned, if those lands were suitable for development, the entire 148 units could be spread over the entire portion of the lands for development. In terms of the policy context, Mr. Mayor, the application will be reviewed for consistency and compliance with provincial, regional, and municipal policies, which include the provincial policy statements, growth plan, Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, York Regional Official Plan, Town of Vaughan Official Plan, and the provisions of our current zoning bylaw. We've taken a preliminary review of the official plan amendment. It's currently out circulation for comments. The following matters will be reviewed in further evaluative form by staff to deal with the consistency of the policies of official plan amendment number 34, conformity to the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation policies. The lands are within a settlement area of the Oak Ridges Conservation Plan. However, there are provisions which do apply to the subject lands, which would have to be complied with. Specific site development policies that could be applied to the subject lands and incorporated as part of any policies for future development of the lands. Compatibility to surrounding existing and future land uses. And of course, we will be evaluating the technical studies that have been submitted, which includes environmental consideration, servicing, access, and grading. In conclusion, we will undertake a technical review of the subject applications and report back to a future General Committee meeting as recommended in the staff report. And thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And I believe for the proponent, we have Amy Shepherd from the IBI Group. Ms. Shepherd?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thank you very much for having me here tonight. My name is Amy Shepherd. I'm a professional planner with IBI Group, and I am the agent representing Infrastructure Ontario. Infrastructure Ontario, for those who aren't familiar, is the agent to the Ministry of Infrastructure, managing its realty assets and facilities. Mr. Lettman covered off a lot of the background information, so I'll just quickly reiterate some of the situational pieces. Tonight I just want to quickly give you an overview of 50 Bloomington. It is an interesting site given that it has 5 distinct parcels, and our application tonight applies just to the eastern parcel. I'll go over the proposed redesignation, the official plan amendment application and its merits, and I know people here tonight will be interested to have an idea of what is going to happen to the remainder of the lands, and I'll provide an update to that. As Mr. Lettman mentioned, the 30-acre site is comprised of 5 distinct parcels. Monk's Walk, which is located to the north, it is a natural wooded trail. The western parcel is comprised primarily of wooded areas and undeveloped forest. The north central parcel is a large meadow field, also undeveloped. And the only piece of the parcel that has been developed is the eastern parcel. It currently contains a large surface parking lot that accommodates over 200 cars, 2 access driveways, one off of Bloomington Road and one off of Yonge Street, a 4-story building that is almost 6,000 square meters. It was originally constructed almost 100 years ago for a private Catholic school for De La Salle by the Christian Brothers. And then in the 1940s up until the 1980s, it was used as a provincial hospital. Over that time, the building was altered, some additions were made, and when the province took it over as a government office building, it was completely gutted from the inside. And over the past couple decades, it's been used by various provincial ministries, such as the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Ministry of Transportation, and it has some community services within the facility, such as a driver's licensing and testing center. The building and the site location are not ideal for government uses, and Infrastructure Ontario is considering at this stage whether or not it might relocate those tenants in the future. The building requires significant and costly renovations. The town does include the property on its register of properties of cultural heritage and value or interest, but it's not a provincially listed property at this point. As Mr. Lettman noted, the site is located in southwest Aurora at the border between the town of Aurora and the town of Richmond Hill. And it has a wide range of surrounding land uses that primarily are low density in character. To the immediate north, which is not part of the IO site or this application, is an Ontario Provincial Police Station. Then there is additional single family to the north, a proposed multi-unit wellness facility, and proposed townhouses. To the south, you have Bloomington Road, and then within the town of Aurora, you have existing and proposed single family residential and parklands. To the east, you have Yonge Street, a nursing home, as Mr. Lettman mentioned, as well as single-family housing and proposed row housing. Some of this new housing is recent infill within the area. And to the west is primarily public use facilities, including a water tower, a school, and school board facilities for the Catholic School Board. The site and the surrounding area, this part of southwest Aurora, is well serviced by existing infrastructure as well as services, and this includes transit. You have the BRT, Bus Rapid Transit, Viva, running along Yonge. You're within close proximity to existing GO stations and a proposed new GO station, and as well there's regional local bus service that runs along Bloomington and Yonge Street. The 30-acre site, the entire site, is located within the Oak Ridges Moraine, but it's designated as a settlement area. And as Mr. Letman noted, currently the lands are designated by the Yonge Street South Secondary Plan as minor institutional, major institutional, environmental function area, and environmental protection area. The eastern parcel, which is the parcel we're here for the proposed amendment in land designation, is currently designated primarily as minor and major institutional, and I will further discuss the application. OPA 48 brought into conformity the town with the Oak Ridges Moraine policies as well as regional policies. And throughout the site, there are key natural heritage features and hydrologically sensitive features, as well as the entire site is designated as a landform conservation area. None of these key natural heritage or hydrologically sensitive features are on the portion of the eastern parcel that we're proposing to redesignate to permit low-density residential uses. At this point, as Mr. Letman mentioned, we're simply seeking a land redesignation to help position the property for if and when in the future Infrastructure Ontario decides that its ministry tenants will be moved elsewhere. We work closely with the town and with the Conservation Authority to identify the highest and best uses and optimal uses for the site, taking into consideration the surrounding land uses, which include estate residential to the north and the Monk's Walk, which is an important natural feature that the town has heritage interest in. As Mr. Letman showed you, the existing land designation is primarily major institutional plus minor institutional, with a small piece around 2 kettle ponds to the south of the property, which are designated as environmental protection area. With the TRCA in the town, we staked the site and identified all the natural heritage features, and that is how we came about the location and the configuration, the rather odd configuration of that yellow area shown as the proposed cluster residential. The TRCA considered the remaining lands that we've highlighted in green as undevelopable because of the environmental features. So through this proposed redesignation of the lands, we're proposing that those lands be turned to environmental protection. Our environmental consultant, Beacon, believes that the area in white is a dry valley, and therefore it could be appropriate for development and that it wouldn't have any negative impact on the surrounding natural heritage features. We're requesting that at a later stage, should somebody come forth to purchase the property and is interested in redeveloping it, that they take on the additional required geotech studies to clarify whether or not that area of land is developable or not. We're not seeking any amendments to OPA 48, and as Mr. Letman mentioned, this application will actually increase the amount of environmental protection area on that eastern parcel. Essentially, the redevelopment area that's highlighted in yellow is the existing disturbed land. It's the large surface parking lot, the existing developed and altered landscaped area. With the TRCA, we allowed for very large setbacks to ensure the protection between those natural areas. In addition to the redesignation of those lands to cluster residential and the special policy area, we're asking for some provisions to introduce additional uses to the cluster designation permissions. Right now, the cluster designation within OPA 34 allows for semi-detached and singles, and we're asking that it introduces some stacked townhouses and low-rise apartments no more than 4 stories, as well as continue on with the permissions that exist right now, should the government facility continue on in its current form or redevelop elsewhere within that envelope which we identified in yellow. The lands will continue to be subject to all other policies of the OPA 34 and OPA 48. We feel, following some very detailed technical analysis that involved environmental, preliminary hydrogeological, transportation, servicing, considering the landform conservation area, that the proposed land redesignation and site-specific policies are both desirable and appropriate in terms of land use and from a policy perspective, keeping in line with the town's current objectives that the area, this part of Aurora, remain a low-density, largely natural area, with the overall densities that we've proposed for the entire provincial property at 5 units per hectare, which is what the current official plan allows for. At this time, since there is no development plan for the site, we prepared illustrative development concepts to first of all test how many units could you fit on that already disturbed land and what would its impacts be on municipal servicing, transportation, and the natural heritage. As Mr. Letman showed, the 3 options range from single-family detached housing to some semis to some townhouses, as well as alternate forms of apartment or condominium development should the existing building be retained or if a new low-rise condominium is developed. They're strictly hypothetical, but they helped illustrate how modest residential infill could be accommodated on the site without negatively impacting the important views and vistas to the site from the north, east, south, and west, as well as it will help complement the overall character of the area and make good use of the existing urban infrastructure and services within the area. We believe that the official plan amendment represents good planning and request your consideration for the support for our application. So as I mentioned, those 3 development concepts are strictly hypothetical. Should in the future the 13.3 hectares, which comprise the eastern parcel, be deemed surplus by the province and sold, it would be up to that future landowner to bring forth a development proposal. The Infrastructure Ontario has a fairly lengthy process for them to first of all determine if the lands are surplus. The lands are then put into an expression of interest in an offering that allows first public agencies and governments to express interest, such as other ministries first within the province. Then it would be circulated to the region, the town of Aurora, school boards, and other nonprofit community organizations. And if at that point nobody is interested in acquiring the site, the offering would be released to the public. So this would be a multi-year-long, many-year-long process potentially. And at that stage, it would be up to a future developer, landowner, to determine what they want to put on that site. And if they're looking to develop residential opposed to the institutional uses, they would have to seek necessary improvements through a public process from the town and do a number of supporting studies to support their actual development concept. They would also need site plan approval and potentially a plan of condominium and other approvals depending on the ultimate scenario that is determined. In 2016, Infrastructure Ontario declared the remainder of this large 30-hectare property as surplus, and that's the north central parcel, the western parcel, and Monk's Walk. Academy Road is a private roadway right now held in ownership by the province, but it maintains access to the school and the school board. Again, this offering went through the same process that all surplus properties must go through. It was offered internally to other provincial ministries, and then it was circulated to public agencies and local government. And they received multiple offers of interest, and one was from the town of Aurora, and the town's expression of interest was to acquire the lands for parkland and open space uses. Infrastructure Ontario and the province selected the town's expression as the preferred offering, and they're currently in negotiations with the town for the sale of the land. And once that deal is finished, I believe your Parks and Rec people will start the process for determining how and where they want to put formal recreational facilities, as well as how they might use those other lands for natural open space and trail connections. Given that all of these lands, once this deal is finalized, will remain in an undeveloped state, the proposed official plan amendment represents a very unique opportunity to cluster residential development to that north portion of the eastern parcel, protecting for all those other lands and the many hectares of natural open space. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Now we'll open it up to members of the public. For those of you who might not have been here before, if you come up to the podium, please, you will get 5 minutes. We would like you to give us your name and your address, and then we will start the clock.
Hi, my name is Steve Varga, and I work at 50 Bloomington Road, and I'm here on behalf of the Green Team, which is an organization that represents people who work at 50 Bloomington. And we're very active in trying to protect the environment around this area. And I want to start off with first indicating that the Green Team is strongly opposed to this proposal to rezone the land for residential. This land is public parkland, largely, and we would like to see it continue to remain as public parkland. It is one of the few public parks that's on the top of the Oak Ridges Moraine. And the mayor and councilors realize that this is one of the few parks that we have on the Oak Ridges Moraine in Aurora, and it should continue to remain as a park. Where they're proposing residence includes a beautiful mature planting of spruce and pine trees and a variety of other trees that were planted as part of the LaSalle College. They're very old trees, very beautiful, majestic trees. Those will all be cut down as part of that proposal for residences. As well, the Green Team has also put in a community garden. That community garden would be destroyed by the residences. As well, the Green Team put together a Pine Ridge Trail. So it's a public trail open to everyone, and it circles the natural Kettle Pond and goes through a field and into the forest. And that proposal for residents would go into that field and break up that public Pine Ridge Trail. And so you're having another impact from the proposed residences. As well, the Green Team has planted extensive wildflower gardens throughout the property. Those would all be destroyed by this proposal for residences. Over the past 7 years, we've been planting wildflower gardens, having our community garden, and we feel that this is a very valuable piece of land for Aurora, and as well, it's also an important employment center. There are over 75 people who work at 50 Bloomington, and during the summer that increases with summer students and summer staff to over 100 people. As we all know, Aurora wants to have employment. I live in Toronto, I work in Aurora, I visit the restaurants for lunch and supper, and so do all the other employees in 50 Bloomington. So when that gets destroyed for residences, you're going to have more residences and less employment. And I think it's very important that communities continue to safeguard their employment centers. This is a major employer, having 100 people working at this area. And so I think it's very untoward for this proposal of residences in what is essentially a public park. It is used by the general public. There are people who walk their dogs here, local residents. There are people who run and jog through the area. There are people who picnic in the area. There are numerous picnic tables all through the public parkland. And as well, the building itself is historic. It's over 100 years old, and it should be, I would advocate that the mayor and councilors designate this building historic and have it under provincial protection because it should not be torn down. It was only recently renovated back in 1992. It is in good condition, and it has a very long lifespan still ahead. And I think the optimum future for that land should be continued as it is, to have a major employment center on it, and also to have a major public parkland that is used by the residences and by the employees as for a huge number of uses. As I mentioned, it's got a community garden, it's got It's got wildflower gardens. It has very old trees that
Half a
are
minute, sir.
historic. So thank you very much. I hope you'll put that into consideration.
Thank you. Other speakers, please, on the item. Again, if you can give us your name and your address. You have 5 minutes.
Wallach, and I also work at 50 Bloomington. I haven't seen the proposals until just now, so this is just my quick first impressions. The property includes a 100-year-old institutional building and associated grounds with 100-year-old spruce and linden trees. It's listed on the Aurora Register of Properties of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest, and that should be a major consideration. The proposed special policy area, which is indicated as potentially developable, would separate the significant woodland on the north side from the Oak Ridges Moraine Kettle Pond wetland on the south, thus further fragmenting the already fragmented natural features of the area. I would need to examine the edges of the proposed development area to determine the potential impacts on the endangered butternut trees that I know exist there. And finally, development of the so-called dry valley land and its slopes would not be consistent with the intent of the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. And that briefly is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Don't be bashful. We do not bite.
Your worship, members of council, my name is Jeff Anderson. I live at 588 LeGresley Lane in Newmarket, and I work at 50 Bloomington Side Road. I've only started working there recently, but because of my love of history, I was asked to write an article for one of the ministries about the history of the building. I found it to be extremely interesting. There was two major institutions that had a lot to do with the history of your community. And I think that should be taken into consideration. One of the things, too, that we're trying to find, apparently there are some grave sites from some of the brothers that worked there back in the De La Salle days. And it does appear that this would be going, the houses or the proposal, as I've seen, could be going right over them. We have to find that grave site before we can continue along. However, I just wanted you to take the history of the building, very storied history, into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, my name is Lori Ewitz. I've been a resident of Aurora for over 32 years, and I've worked at 50 Bloomington for just about half of my life. And my only two concerns as a resident of Aurora is every other corner on the southern entrance to town on Yonge Street is developed. There's nothing natural there anymore. It's still a beautiful area. It still provides we just don't need to put more houses on top of the area we already have. It's this last open sort of green space there that we have. And there are a number of full-time permanent jobs there. I'm proof that it provides employment for town residences. There's other people that live in Aurora that have worked there for a great long period of time, and it would be a lot of full-time jobs leaving town. I see in the media often, council's always looking to attract employers to Aurora that can provide good permanent jobs. That's exactly what we already have there, and there are a lot of local residents that work in the building there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of council and Mr. Mayor. My name is John Green, and I live at 5 Fox Point in Aurora. I have lived there for the last 33 years. Reviewing of what the previous speakers have spoken about, I strongly echo their sentiments, but I would like to add to that the fact that, as the last speaker said, this is probably one of the last corners in the entrance to Aurora where there's no high-rises, high density. It's a natural evolution, as it were, as we drive up north towards Aurora. And my understanding was that future councils, past councils and today's council look upon that as an opening sunlit uplands as we drive into Aurora. My concern is that OPA 34, to my knowledge this evening, hasn't been mentioned, where that includes in the official plan 2 units per acre, which is about, I think, 4 units per hectare, something like that. And although the density has been planned, if you will, or proposed at 5 units per hectare, this density, all very well, it's the height that proposed some of the buildings, like 4 stories in height. And to me, this sets a precedent for any future development. So once that has been established, then anybody else coming along, another developer or builder, will point to that and say, look, they got this permission, we'd like that permission as well. So what I'd like to ask the council to consider is, first of all, very important, the heritage value of the LaSalle College that was built over 100 years ago. That was mentioned earlier as well. And that adds character to that part of Aurora, has been with us for a long time. Monk's Walk, that's been protected for many, many years, and I think still should be protected. The lands around there to be used recreational, that's also very important indeed. And again, the 2 institutions, minor and major, or minor in this case, was the Parcel property, where yes, there were 24 units proposed, but these were not high rises, this was low rise, and as yet nothing has been built on there, so I don't know what the future holds for that particular parcel of land. So in conclusion, I ask the council to consider very, very strongly that this property be left in a more rural fashion, recreational fashion. Do not increase the density there. And certainly, as people have said previous to me, there are many, many jobs at stake here, and I feel for them as well. Should anything happen where it turns into just purely residential, there goes a lot of employment there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other speakers? Ms. Shepherd, would you care to come up and address some of the issues?
Mr. Mayor, am I able to put back the slides? Thank you. We'll just go to the I think I just wanted to clarify, one of the first pieces is the, thank you, sorry, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just wanted to clarify in terms of the proposed redesignation, which is not a proposed development at this stage, would apply to just those lands that are highlighted in yellow, as well as potentially the special policy area. The Kettle lands to the south, which people showed concern with, will be protected, and actually the amount of natural open space will increase. As you see right now, the entire site, except for that central portion, is designated for major institutional, plus the corner in the top is designated for minor. Right now, there are permissions then for development of those lands. What's being proposed is to actually reduce the envelope of where development may occur to stay with the existing area, and not the whole area where it is currently permitted right now. In terms of the protection of what's a very unique and one of the last resources with the Oak Ridgelands Moraine, very much agree, which is why this particular situation is quite interesting in that the council and the town of Aurora is considering the acquisition of the remainder lands, which includes Monk's Walk, which is a very important public open space that does have limited accessibility right now, plus that whole north central parcel and the western parcel. Right now, the north central parcel that is vacant and undeveloped has development permissions. It could be redeveloped with institutional uses. Should this endeavor go through, it would remove those development permissions and it would be protected for public open space and natural resources. The types of heights and densities that were entertained with this proposal, we work closely with the town of Aurora to ensure it is consistent with the existing policy permissions. The OPA 34 currently has permissions where you can have a maximum of 5 units per hectare, but that may be over the constrained and unconstrained lands within an area. What we're proposing is not to exceed that envelope, but to use those constrained and unconstrained areas, making much of them undevelopable as future parkland and natural open space, and clustering the residential. And the types of residential that's being considered through the illustrative development concepts as well as the policy provisions would allow for continued low density, low rise. It is not high rise. The existing building is 4 stories, and that's how the 4-story cap on any future residential came about, whether it's through adaptive reuse, continued uses as institutional uses, or potentially a new low-rise apartment. The rest of the concept plan show 2-story single-family detached, some 2-story townhouses, and really would be up to a future developer to determine what sort of mix of residential, but it certainly is not intended to introduce high-rise to the area. And we worked to ensure the existing policies with an OPA 34 were respected, where there must be a very large buffer between Yonge Street and any development, so that a historic hedgerow along Yonge Street would be preserved with that string of mature trees. And through the staking with the Conservation Authority, they did identify some butternut trees closer to the north central parcel and the top of the eastern parcel, where we are suggesting that it should be redesignated for environmental function land because of those butternut trees. Go back down.
You can come back. Thanks, thanks, Ms. Shepherd. We'll go once more with it. Give us, we need your name and address again, sir.
Sure, it's Steve Varga, and I work at the 50 Bloomington Road. And I just want to refute some of the claims made by the planner, just to you right now. In fact, dozens of trees that are almost 100 years old will be destroyed for those proposed residences. And all that would be left is just the trees right on the edge of the west side of Yonge Street. So there will be dozens of trees destroyed. They will fragment the west side of the property that does have Oak Ridge's moraine natural features. It has a forest, and to the south a kettle pond. They're proposing in that dry valley to possibly also have further residences in there down the road. And that will fragment that western side of the natural features that we have right now, and that has a public trail already in it. So they will impact on a public trail and on fragmenting that western side of that natural habitat. They also, the planner fails to mention that there's a community garden that will be covered by the residences. There's wildflower gardens in there as well. So to claim that this is a environment first proposal is totally wrong. This is actually environment last. We should be preserving this area and enhancing it, not putting buildings and homes on top of what is a parkland and that is used by the general public as a parkland. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please come forward. Thank you. Can you give us your name and address, please?
Yes, Karen Bailey, B-A-Y-L-Y.
Thank you.
79 Hollage Drive in Aurora. I didn't actually come prepared to speak, but I'm sitting here listening and I'm thinking of what we're not talking about, and that's the OPP station. I also work at 50 Bloomington part-time, and there's a tremendous amount of police traffic coming in and out of the property. I don't know if they have holding cells there, if they have dangerous criminals there, but perhaps that's not a great area to have families and children. That's just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to speak, just come on down to the microphone.
This question is actually directed at the planner, and several references were made to future developers. So there may be a plan for something that's going to happen in the fairly near future, but the future development, although lands have been set aside, etc., for them to come up with whatever, that leaves the field wide open to higher density, higher heights on the buildings, a lot more traffic, etc. So my question to the planner is there any control or anything at all that could be guaranteed that this future developer wouldn't come forward with some requests that challenge what already has been set in place?
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other comments from the public? Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct that at this stage there are no development plans, and if the lands were deemed surplus and if they went through the process where they were not required by a member of the province or a public agency or a community group, they could then be put on the market to a private sector developer. And it would be the responsibility of that developer to comply with the existing policy provisions that we are proposing, which is a maximum of 148 units, either allocated within that cluster area or spread out amongst that special policy area should future hydrogeological studies deem that it's appropriate. There is no guarantee that a developer could not come in and try and change those, but it would have to go through a full public process again with an official plan amendment. And things such as the height and specifics in terms of setback, we have set a 4-story height limit, but it would be through the zoning bylaw that certain refinement could be made to any future development proposal.
Excuse me. Any other things you wish to comment on?
No, I think I would welcome members of the public, and certainly I'd be happy to share them after. I believe all the documents that we submitted in support of the application are available for review and further illustrate the areas that were staked in conjunction with the Toronto, or the TRCA, the Conservation Authority, to show how, in terms of the proposed development envelope, it is contained to the disturbed areas, which I do acknowledge do have some trees in the community garden, but it is contained to the existing disturbed areas within that eastern parcel, and that the environmental background studies speaks to the logic behind where the TRCA did do those stakings.
For a third time, any members of the public? Okay, name and address, please.
Asha Fortini. I work at 50 Bloomington Road, but I'm also a resident of Aurora. I have been here for 19 years, and once I left home, I really wanted to continue to live in Aurora and to raise my family in Aurora and to work in Aurora. So I have been lucky that I've been able to do so, and it affords me quite a great amount of work-life balance to live in Aurora, work in Aurora, and raise my young family in Aurora. On my lunch hours, I can go out and run and get that birthday gift that I forgot to, grab for my son's friend's birthday, and I'm going and I'm doing that, and I'm shopping in Aurora. I can grab my groceries on my way home, and I'm doing that in Aurora. And it was a very deliberate decision to work and continue to reside in Aurora. And should I be moved out of Aurora and relocated in terms of employment, it would be a very crucial decision for me about whether or not I would remain in Aurora to live and raise my family. Thank you.
Thank you. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Xin Zhang. I'm a resident of Aurora. I moved to Aurora about 7.5 years ago. I'm living on the 71 Equestrian Drive. I moved from Richmond Hill to Aurora, but to my very disappointment, I found that there aren't a good public park, as well as a sufficient facilities, such as there is a community center, but the facilities are not as good as those in Richmond Hill, which provided many community centers with a lot of facilities. I mean, in the whole planning of the town, I wish that more consideration can be given to the development of more parks or other public facilities rather than develop every last piece of land to residential, especially for this very clustered residential area. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Laura Ewitz, I live in Aurora. Just building on what the other woman said that, about the OPP there, none of us had thought of that actually. As I said before, I've worked there just about half my life, almost 29 years, and in that time, let me tell you, the police zoom in and out of there. They have to at times. At shift change, you got to be careful going by, and when they go out, before they go out, they test their sirens, and that's reasonable that they do that. I can see future problems coming though from that, where there's noise from the police. They're going too fast. They're endangering our children. Like, I can't say that keeping the OPP there, which is very integral to the community and York region as a whole, it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public, please? All right, if there's, thank you very much for your
My name is Warren May, and I'm a retired biologist from the Ministry of Natural Resources. I live in Newmarket. Some people might know me from in the media. I was involved with tranquilizing a bear in Aurora off of Wellington a few years back. A lot of people don't realize just how much wildlife we have in the Aurora area and how well the linkages are. And usually, if you've got a principle, it's protect what you have, and no one's really making green spaces anymore. So when I hear a preliminary talk today about essentially putting a donut around a pond, and the function is going to be protected, what is the function of the pond? Is it a hydrological one? Is it a wildlife habitat area? And how are they going to get to it? When I first came to the Aurora district in '97, there was a little wetland to the south side of Bloomington towards Bathurst, and that's all subdivision now. But at the time, I was looking for a house when I moved here, and there was a little pond wetland there. And as I drive by, you'd hear the spring peepers calling. And that pond was left from development. They put a fence around it during construction, silt fence. The silt fence pretty much kept the froggies from getting to the pond, but the pond was protected. If you were to drive by there today, I'd be surprised if you can hear spring peepers. In working at this office, and again, I'm retired now, but I'd come in late at night and go early in the morning often, and we'd see deer, white-tailed deer, wild turkeys, all in this area. So to hear them talking about putting a dry valley special policy area that drains to the pond, and then that could be developed in the future, is how do the little critters actually get to the pond? How's the drainage going to the pond, maintaining the function of the pond? I would invite you to go out and take a look at the pond and the drainage from the parking lot at the M&R office now, and how degraded the outlet is. And now you're going to add another 100 and some houses to the area with drainage coming to that same location. It's at the bottom of the hill. All the water runs downhill. The concept doesn't talk about stormwater management for the subdivision, but that extra water is going to be not as good quality and infiltration as it has today. So you get a pond left, but what's the function going to be? There's not much in the preliminary reports we've got today, so you can't really analyze it that well. But adding this to it, I don't really see how that protects the function that's there without having a negative impact. And I wasn't really prepared to talk tonight. This is all new to me tonight. I may have some comments later. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public before I close this portion of the meeting? And I'll close the public portion of this part of the meeting at this point, and I will open it up to councillors for comments on the proponent. And Councillor Perry, I had you first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if Ms. Shepherd can...
Yeah, Ms. Shepherd.
Have any environmental studies taken place on the property to see if there is any contamination due to past uses?
Hello, yes. There was a Phase 1 environmental site assessment done, which was submitted with the application, and it did identify some areas that required future investigation. So that would be necessary to undertake that Phase 2 study before any future development plans are moved forward as part of any potential rezoning or site plan approval application. The contamination areas of interest that were found were related to the old boilers and other mechanical paint fertilizer.
Ms. Shepherd, excuse me, just back. Yeah, it's a very sensitive microphone.
Sure, sorry.
And we actually turn the microphone on and off from here, so.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
And to follow up, do you know if the ministry is intending to perform the second phase of those studies, or is that going to be left on the purchaser?
It's my understanding that they don't intend to do any more studies at this stage, but I can bring that back to my client and get back to you on that.
Councillor Perry?
Could you clarify for me how clustering works, but, on encumbered land and unencumbered land?
It's my understanding, based on the policies of OPA 34, that given this area of Aurora is intended to remain as a low density with large open natural spaces, that there's a density cap put on 5 units per hectare, but that is allowed to occur over constrained and unconstrained lands. And those constrained lands would be those that were identified through our staking exercise, or that had already been designated through your OPA 48, through the Oak Ridges Moraine and the regional plan that showed it was an environmentally sensitive area. So by clustering, you have the permissions for those density for your entire site, but you're looking to avoid disturbing those natural areas and clustering them in one area.
Councillor?
And as a follow-up then, so you've managed to cluster all of the density for the entire site onto the portions that you're looking to rezone to accommodate the entire site's density.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes, it's actually through the land redesignation. A rezoning would have to occur at a later stage. Yes, so the permissions for the 30-hectare site, if you maintain that cap and the existing policy permissions, which allow the clustering of density, would allow for up to 150 units. We prepared 3 illustrative development concepts that showed how different forms of single detached housing, semi-detached housing, it could be pieces or, could be accommodated within the already disturbed lands, which comprise the parking lot and the landscaped front garden area. The special policy area, if at some point future analysis is undertaken and it is deemed appropriate, that 148 units could not be increased with the proposed policy and amendment. That density could be spread out, though, allowing for larger lots, other forms of low-density housing.
Councillor Perry?
Thank you. I think you thought about the question I was going to ask you. There have been instances in the past where portions of property were sold at one point, and then the redevelopment took place over, again, the entire area, and then an application came in a few years later to build more homes where the density had already been utilized. Nobody likes to hear stories of double dipping, especially when it's a loophole that the province may have initiated or not closed. So it would be my hope and my expectation that you prevent that from happening through this process, to ensure that if somebody does move forward with the redesignated lands and is able to put in the 146 homes that would be permitted throughout the whole area, that from your end, the loophole would be closed to ensure that there would be no other development on this site.
Ms. Shepherd?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that was the intent of the proposed redesignation, understanding that that was a concern of the town.
Councillor?
That's everything for now. Thank you.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I have a question regarding specific things you mentioned about OPA 34. If I remember your presentation correctly, you mentioned that you're looking for amendments to some of the cluster residential types of dwellings that the plan currently allows for. And correct me if I'm wrong, but currently the plan, OPA 34, allows for detached and semi-detached. And your plan, or at least what you're requesting, is to include linked and townhouses, low-rise apartments, as well as the institutional uses that you're already permitted on the site currently. Is that correct?
Ms. Shepherd?
It is.
So, thank you. So my question is why, if you're clearly the Ontario government isn't going to develop this property residential, they're looking to sell it with this zoning in place. Our current policies indicate that you have semi-detached and detached homes in OPA 34. I understand it makes it more attractive, but is that the reason why? I mean, what's wrong with leaving OPA 34 in terms of the types of dwelling units that are allowed in place?
Ms. Shepherd?
Thank you, Councillor Chom. The existing permissions and the addition to them reflects that the area is well serviced by transit, and that the types of housing we want to introduce respect the current built form on the site. If the existing facility is to be adaptively reused into residential, or if a new 4-story, it's not introducing a new building height into the landscape. And with the townhouses, again, it would keep at the same height as a single-family house or as a semi-detached house. We thought it was appropriate for this part of the urban area and a designated settlement area, particularly given the proximity to transit and the existing infrastructure. We also ran all of our traffic analysis to show that in certain circumstances, given the peak AM and PM traffic volumes that are associated with certain types of uses, that it would not be detrimental to the area. And again, those reports were submitted as part of our application and I believe are available for review.
Councillor Tell?
Thank you very much. I haven't seen a report submitted that hasn't been in favor of certain developments, but my point is that, you know, I have no doubt that the land, in your opinion, can support these types of dwellings, but you're asking for our policy to be amended, which has huge implications for developments that come after. So that's one of my main concerns, and I appreciate your answer. So essentially is what I thought was the case, which is, you know, it enhances the attractiveness of this area for sale. My second question is with respect to the heritage of the site. Have you completed any heritage assessments of the site at large and the building itself?
Ms. Shepherd?
Councillor Tom, yes. As part of the application, a built heritage study was submitted, and a natural heritage study that was part of the environmental assessment was also submitted. The EIS covered both the north central parcel and the eastern parcel. It did not cover the western parcel since no development is being contemplated at this point. And we have been asked by
town staff to do some further analysis of the existing Monk's Trail and its role as a natural heritage feature, and we are doing that as well.
Councillor?
So just to confirm, the De La Salle College portion, the building and the grounds have been assessed by a heritage whatever, I guess, assessor. Yes, okay. And I guess I'll save the rest of my comments for the portion of that meeting where council gives comments. Thank you very much.
Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming. Couple of things I don't understand. I believe you said the entire site is designated a land conservation area?
Ms. Shepherd?
I mean...
Yes, Ms. Gartner, the entire site is within the Oak Ridges Moraine, and it's designated as a landform conservation area, and there's policy requirements that are intended to limit the amount of development that's allowed, that is permitted within that area, to minimize coverage and minimize the disturbance of the natural heritage features. And our studies that were submitted with the illustrative development concepts show how they far exceed those minimum expectations.
Councillor?
Thank you. You're talking about the 4 stories. You're using the 4 stories because that's what De La Salle is?
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes, Councillor. The existing building is 4 stories, and given the topography of the site, it has limited visibility from certain portions of Yonge Street or the lands to the north or even to the south when you're driving along Bloomington. So we felt that exceeding that height would introduce a new view and vista, which is why our recommendations with our proposed policies capped any future multi-unit residential at the 4 stories.
Councillor?
Thank you, but in fact that would be greater height than our OPA 34 allows, even though De La Salle is an old heritage building and it has the 4 stories.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes, your existing cluster residential designation, it doesn't have a height cap from my knowledge, but it does speak to single family and semi-detached dwellings, which typically are not more than 3 stories.
Councillor?
Thank you. Can you speak to the concern about the Kettle Lake and the environmental area, and what, in your opinion, would the Kettle Lake look like? I mean, would it be a dead lake? And also the linkage areas?
Ms. Shepherd?
Certainly at the next meeting, I think we will bring our environmental heritage experts and biologists. Unfortunately, I can only speak to what was shown in the report. One of the exciting opportunities, should the lands redevelop over time, is right now the majority of the top portion of the eastern parcel is a paved cement unporous area. So our stormwater management report, certainly picking up on the town's sustainable development and eco-friendly approaches, would encourage permeability and not such a large paved area. I'm afraid I can't totally speak to all the findings of the Kettle Lake, but certainly it was included in the studies done by our environmental heritage consultants, Beacon, as well as part of our stormwater management study. It would be 100% expected that should any development proposal go forth, that future applicant would submit very detailed stormwater management natural heritage reports that are based on that actual development concept. We were only able to test the 3 hypothetical scenarios.
Yeah. And with respect to the traffic for the OPP also has an entrance off of Yonge Street. So is there any thought to just having that as an emergency exit for OPP and them using, I can't see the cars racing through a residential area.
So Gartner, as part of a future application, certainly both our regional roads, Yonge Street and Bloomington Road, and our traffic analysis did make recommendations on how to minimize any interference between the OPP and any potential future development, and certainly looking at a main access for one use being off of perhaps Bloomington Road with only emergency access being off of Yonge Street could be explored, as well as alternate turning movements in terms of permitting only a right in, right out, and trying to minimize those. Our traffic engineers did explore whether or not a light could be added, but they believe the minimum distance separation between your existing four-way lights at Yonge Street and Bloomington would not permit that. So the expectation is if a future development application came in, based on the development proposal, they would work closely with the town and with the region to ensure appropriate traffic mitigation measures are in place.
Councillor Gardner.
Last question, maybe beyond your knowledge, but there are a lot of people employed here. Are these jobs going to be kept? Do you know? If not,
it's something that I cannot speak to. We can certainly come back to you with IO. At this point, there are no plans. We'll have to get back to you on that piece.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to proponent. The provincial government is not going to be developing this property themselves, are they?
No, they are not, Councillor. It's not typically in their practice unless it is redeveloped for provincial institutional uses. Then IO is generally involved in all ministerial infrastructure development. But their intention, if it was to be deemed surplus and pass on to the town or to the region or to a community group or to a public sector, that they would sell the lands and not be involved in a development.
Councillor?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So if they're not going to be developing it, then why look for an amendment to the zoning? Why not just sell the lands or deem them surplus and just have them sell as they currently sit, and then allow a developer to come and ask for a zoning amendment and put forward an application that shows what they will be developing?
Ms. Shepherd?
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. This is a typical practice of Infrastructure Ontario to position the lands for optimal use, which when we worked with the town and with the Conservation Authority, deemed that residential would be a potential good use for the site should institutional uses not move forward. So it was deemed to help prepare the lands for potential optimal use. Again, it's just the redesignation, and should a future developer come in, they'd be responsible for any rezoning should the proposal not be for minor or major institutional uses.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, just my last question. So should that be a provincial decision or a municipal decision?
Ms. Shepherd?
Excuse me, on the redesignation, it lies with the municipality in terms of whether or not to approve the proposed request. As I mentioned, it is typical for provincial agencies, if they are looking at potentially disposing of land, to optimize their land use and get policy permissions in place. It was premature at this time, we thought, to go for a rezoning, because at the end of the day, we don't know if and when the lands might be disposed of and what a future user might be interested in developing. So that's really a very specific endeavor, and that's why it was suggested that that not be undertaken at this time.
Councillor? Thank you. Any other councillor questions for the proponent? Okay, then we'll close this portion of the meeting. Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. We'll go to the report. If someone would put that on the floor, please, so we can speak to it. Councillor Perry, thank you. Councillor Thompson. Speakers, please. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. First thing I'm going to ask some questions about is the heritage of the site. The report talks about a study being done in 2006, which was done by I believe it was done by the provincial government. And then there's some excerpts, I believe, from OPA 34, which specifically talk about Monk's Walk and De La Salle College, even though the lands are on the list, they're not designated. So do I have that correct, Mr. Ramuno, so far?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's correct.
Councillor.
Thank you. So we haven't got that report in front of us, that heritage report. So anyways, where I'm going with this is I'd like to make an amendment that this property, or at least, I don't know how to word it, whether it's Monk's Walk and De La Salle or just the entire property, if they need to both be included, that they both be sent to the Heritage Advisory Committee for review. If it's on the list, and we're looking at potentially, you know.
Just a second, Councillor. Let's confirm first of all what your amendment
So I'd like
is.
to, I don't know how to word it, whether it's the entire property. Typically, when you look at designation of a property, it's the entire property.
Mr.
But I don't know if the building itself or Monk's Walk has to be separated
Okay, well,
out.
I'm going to go to Mr. Rumino
So
for
I'd like
some words missing.
to know what the wording should be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and that would be our next course of action to, in this case, take the application to our Heritage Advisory Committee and to evaluate the proposal, specifically the built property being the De La Salle College, as well as the Monk's Trail. Now, as we've heard from the applicant, a heritage study was prepared. Monk's Trail, the existing trail, is not proposed as part of any redesignation or future development. And at this point, nor is De La Salle College, but we will take the application to our Heritage Advisory Committee for their review and comment.
Councillor Tom, do you still wish to have an amendment?
Yeah, I'd like the amendment to just put that in writing. So I'd like that to be
So
the amendment.
the proposal be referred. I would think that the
Sure.
proposal be referred to the Heritage
For
Advisory.
evaluation by the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Is there a second for that, please? Councillor Marcus. Any comments to the amendment? Just, I'll call a hand vote on the amendment then, please. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Tom, back to you.
Thank you. So I think as this process moves forward, a lot of my questions about the heritage of the building will be assessed at the Heritage Advisory Committee. We'll see further reports, so I don't really have to talk too much about that. John Green spoke about, or was it John or another gentleman, I forget, talked about potential grave sites. I mean, there's lots of stuff that needs to be looked at here. So anyhow, we can look at that as we move forward. One thing I'm certainly, as an initial comment, I'm not in favor for, at least at this point in time, is I talked about them in my questions, was the amendments, I suppose, to OPA 34 with respect to the dwellings. I mean, have we ever gotten an application that has asked for that to be amended? I don't think we have. So that's something new, correct? That right now you're allowed detached and semi-detached dwellings in OPA 34, and they're asking to increase their uses?
Mr. Romero?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, so the current secondary plan OPA 34 does permit within the cluster residential designations the low-density housing, detached semis, and townhomes are permitted. What the application is asking for, they're not asking for an increase in density, they are asking for a redesignation from institutional to cluster residential, but they are asking for the 4-story permission really to reflect the existing De La Salle College. So our current secondary plan does permit townhomes, but the height is really restricted to 3 stories.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you. So my initial comment to that is that I'm not in favor of that, at least at this time, because once we do it for this parcel, it's impossible to restrict that moving forward. And I think there's a reason why we have those restrictions in place, especially on this piece of property. The one thing that's also causing me troubles now, and I'll wait to hear what the rest of council has to say, is the proposal for the special policy area. I mean, the provincial government's asking us to redesignate these lands to optimize them for sale, and yet they're not asking us to do that for the entirety of the site. They're just basically saying, this might be, they don't want to spend the money on the hydrological studies, so we'll leave that to a future developer. I mean, we're going through all the trouble to do this. I think we either do the entire property or we do, I don't want to parcel it off and have to have it come back to us later. If the special policy area, as outlined in their report and in the presentations we have seen, if that is worthy of environmental protection, we should do that now, as opposed to wait till later. So that's a comment on that. So I'll wait to see what other members of council have to say before I further comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thompson? Councillor Tom? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I think one of the concerns I have, and maybe others around the table share it too, is that there's just a lot of uncertainty of the future development of the site. We had a similar conversation with regards to the Canadian Tire lands recently, and so I think that, through you to Mr. Ramuno, I mean, what, if anything, can we do to try and, manage any of that future development? Because the concern would be is that if we were allow this to proceed, then, you know, if they were to sell it, you could have a developer come forward and he could change the density application or look for higher heights or densities or try and expand upon that institutional zoning and put in a 6-story senior center. I mean, what tools are available to us that if we choose to move forward with this, we can help shape any future development?
Mr. Ramuno.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the request for the redesignation here, the one thing that we could do as we move forward in our evaluation, what the applicant is really asking for is that redesignation, as Ms. Shepherd mentioned earlier on, to redesignate that portion, that eastern portion, from institutional to low-density residential, cluster residential, but some of the other lands that are currently within institutional designation based on the environmental work is to redesignate those lands to environmental protection designations. So that would be a protection if we were to move forward, that some of those lands that currently don't have a environmental protection designation per se under the OP, that could be part of the application. Again, moving forward, should they ever sell a property, you know, as we've spoken many times before, any future owner could come in and propose amendments to the official plan and zoning, but they would have to come before council and demonstrate and justify any change, and we would have an opportunity at that point. But as part of this application, they are proposing to designate some of the institutional lands to residential, but the balance to environmental protection areas.
Councillor Thompson.
My only other comment, and Councillor Perry brought it up earlier, is that, yeah, I think there is a real concern with regards to cluster residential and using the density for the overall site for this specific one, and then at a later date, seeing another application looking for development. Somehow, there needs to be some sort of mechanism to prevent that.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think Councillor Thompson addressed my concern. If we allow this based on the fact that the other two parcels, oh, that's off now, the west and the north central remain green space, that means that any potential buyer is going to pay a price for, like it wouldn't be for residential or something, so that the value of that land would be not attractive and would probably get a very low price. And then down the road, they could leverage whoever purchased it, unless it was someone. I'm a little caught in what we can talk about with that potential land on the other side. But the applicant did make mention that something was going on, and I've been told not to say anything, so I don't know where we are there. Anyways, I would like to sort of see that sort of in order. I can see what they're saying if it remains green space, and we, you know, we've already seen in this town a purchase of green space that was later brought forward into a residential application. So, I mean, how are we going to safeguard against that? So I really think we're in a very awkward spot. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask through you, what can I say about those two parcels of land on the left, or to the west?
Based on the advice from our solicitor, I would not speak to it.
All right. So we have to either go into a closed session or wait till things start falling in order before I can make any comment. So the applicant, just so I'm clear, has taken 3 parcels, is going to make one make attractive, and we are to assume that there will be no development and only green space on the other 2. Therefore, they're allowed to cluster all that onto one. Okay, so I got that. All right, I'll leave that for now. So it has to come back. I can't see it going to general committee with notes until that occurs, and I don't know how to make that very clear at this time. I did want to ask on the site, through you, Mr. Mayor, the part that was referred to as cleared land, the application would only build on that cleared land and there'd be no destruction of any trees or anything else impacted anywhere else. is that perfectly clear? Can we enforce that? Or because a number of people came and stepped forward and said there will be vegetation destruction and other features taken out. So could I get that clarified, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Minow.
Sir, through you, Mr. Mayor. The proponent has indicated, based on those three conceptual plans, that where they're clustering their future residential development is within the area that is currently developed, where the De La Salle College is, and the surface parking area. And there really aren't many significant trees. There are some trees there, obviously. They may have to come down. Again, we don't have a development proposal, but as we move forward, if there is a development proposal, we do have some opportunities to try and manage and mitigate the number of trees that have to come down. But their conceptual development proposals are really focused around the area that is currently disturbed in the parking area.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, we have a representative for the application, Ms. Shepherd. I know I can't ask her any questions now, but is there anyone from the ministry itself present that is hearing anything?
Yes.
So I sort of understand what we're trying to do and accomplish out of this whole thing. If we can put something in that is going to use all the land and put it into sort of a cluster and minimize or say there can't be any impact as proposed, I'm sort of in favor of moving that way. But there has to be safeguards because, as Councillor Thompson said, what if things don't work through the way the plan is and a developer grabs the other part, and we all know that scenario. So why don't we try and get all that in order and then move forward? And I just sort of my thoughts. I'm very cautious about moving forward, approving as it is today until we get through the whole picture.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've never agreed with the cluster aspect of residential, setting it up like this, the way sometimes it does happen, and I have some of the share the same concerns, but I'm not going to go through that aspect of it because it's already been talked about a couple of times. But the one thing I do have concerns, and Councillor Thompson touched on it. To me, this is the same thing as that Canadian Tire application that came before us. It's for sale. While this is not for sale per se right at this moment, we all understand that it's going to be deemed surplus. That's why they're here looking for an amendment, is to make it more attractive, as they say, to optimize the highest and best use. But at the end of the day, that's also to increase the profit. And I don't think it's our job to make an amendment just to increase the profit margin. So I'm not in favor, just as I wasn't in favor of making any changes to the application of the Canadian Tire one until the actual applicant that will be developing the property came in and asked for what they would like to do. That's when I will take a long and hard look and decide what's in the best interest of this community. Right now, I'm not in favor of making any changes to this property. If they want to deem it surplus and sell it, by all means, go right ahead. And then when that applicant comes in and puts forward an application, we can deal with it at that time. So personally, I believe that we should be doing the same thing that we did with that one, is to defer it. And definitely, I think it should be deferred until we get something back from the Heritage Committee stating whether that property is going to be designated or not. I would also like to see this go to the Trails Committee. But I definitely will not support this coming to a general committee meeting, and I'm not in favor of it even coming back to a public planning meeting.
Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with all of the comments that have been made at the table. In particular, following on Councillor Maracas, I think we should do what we should do with the Canadian Tire property. But of particular interest to me are these very old trees. Vegetation agreement puts in new trees, and there's no way of replacing these beautiful old trees. That needs to be looked at. The 4 stories is problematic to me. Just because De La Salle has 4 stories, that doesn't mean we should change our policy. And the other thing, and I'm sure it will come back, but redesignating institutional to environmental function area, unless we can prove that the environmental area functions, we can't really call it an environmental functioning area. There needs to be a lot more work here.
Okay, Councillor Gartner. Councillor Tom, then, for the second time.
Thank you. And I'm going to seek a bit more clarity as well. So this is not a rezoning application. This is a redesignation application for the official plan, but they're not actually asking for a zoning change. Correct?
Councillor Tom, sorry.
Thank you. And I guess perhaps I didn't pick this up initially and haven't picked it up until other members of council have spoken, and I appreciate the comments because they're looking, I was under the impression that they were looking to cluster the eastern parcel, or so-called eastern parcel, but they're actually looking to use the entire western, north, central, and eastern as a part of the cluster.
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, and that's provided for in the current official plan.
Councillor Tom.
Yeah, that's accounted for in the current official plan if you acquire the whole property. If we allow this designation to go forward with clustering, and that we're using the whole property as calculation, and then the province severs the property and sells it off, they're going to be able to build their 148 based on clustering that took place, and that property, that whatever it is, 13 hectare eastern parcel, is now not 30 hectares, it's 13. So they're, under the current rules, if they had bought the severed property and asked for cluster residential, they'd be entitled to much less built form. Is that not correct?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. I mean, the province owns the entire 30 hectares. And there are other tools that we can put in place if we're to move forward with respect to whether it's designating those lands open space or putting in place conservation easements not to allow any development or transfer of density to occur, or as Ms. Shepherd mentioned, there's obviously the option of purchasing those open space lands as well.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you. So that changes the whole ballgame for me because we've looked at this in the past. We've talked about this many times at the council table. I don't have to repeat or to get into the whole discussion about clustering, but I mean, that is totally not something that I'm comfortable with. So that's a comment, but I won't support this going to a general committee. I'd rather support this coming back to a public planning meeting and having all these addresses or concerns addressed. I mean, I'll make that amendment that to change clause 2, that this be brought back to a future public planning meeting.
Seconded by Councillor Perry. Any comments or questions on the amendment? All in favor? Hand side then. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Tom.
I just think there's a lot of work left to do on this, and with respect to the comparison to Canadian Tire, Canadian Tire was asking for a rezoning of the property and really just expanding uses for commercial uses. I know that we had our disagreements about that, so we don't have to get into that. This is just asking for our official plan, and I'm not opposed necessarily to what they're proposing in terms of residential, so long as it doesn't it addresses the concerns that we've all brought up. And I don't want to give permissions at the table tonight, or perceived permissions, and then when a potential buyer or a purchaser of the property comes in with a real zoning application, you've already committed essentially to what's going to be at that space. And so I think I'm not against the idea of amending the official or redesignating the lands in the official plan, because someone's still going to have to come back for the zoning application. So that doesn't give me as much issue with the application. It's more just the clustering we talked about, the heritage, the environmental protection, and a number of the other issues that councillors have brought up. So that's all the comments I have for this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I realize we're not making zoning changes. I just don't think it's our obligation to increase the value of the property so someone can make a bigger profit. I don't think that's our place. I don't think that's our job. So Yeah, this makes it more attractive, but also what it does is it allows for that double dipping to occur where there's a possibility that it might occur if we were to allow this. And that's the issue I think that we're all struggling with and we don't want to see. And so that's why I'm saying is if we don't make the amendment and say, sell it off, that all of a sudden becomes, if all the parcels get split up to different owners, they won't be able to cluster it at all, which means that 13 hectares right now, you would have what? You would only be able to build under our OPA maybe about 52 units, Mr. Rumino? That's a difference of 100 units on that property. That's huge. And so that's where I'm coming from, and I think if you find that's what most of the majority of the residents that live in the southern end of the town, and I would even say majority of the town would like to see in that area, and that's why we have our OPA 34 at 2 units per acre, because that's what we want. And so that's why I'm not comfortable at all making any amendment that's going to allow for realistically to allow more than what really should be there. So,
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, we're not making a decision tonight. I think the applicant has heard our comments and our concerns loud and clear, so I'm happy that we're sending this back to a public planning meeting so that we can see if those comments and concerns are addressed. I understand Councillor Marakis' concerns about making a decision which will impact the value of the property, but ultimately we're here to look at planning issues. And so that's what we're being tasked with looking at. So as much as I agree with the sentiment, I'm not sure that factors as strongly into my decision on this, because ultimately the value of the property isn't a planning issue, but the questions that we've raised around the table with regards to potential double dipping in the density, is it the highest and best use of this parcel of land? In my head, that's a separate question than are they going to be getting the highest and best check at the end of the day? So let's stick to looking at the planning issues and let's just move forward from there.
Councillor Perry, if there's no more speakers, Linda, would you open the vote, please? Apologize, it was my turn tonight. We've moved to electronic voting system and we're getting used to it. Technology is great, especially when it works. All those in favor of the motion on the screen, please raise your hands at this point. Contrary? Linda, close the vote, please. That is carried. Thank you very much. That finishes this particular item. We'll just take a quick... Yeah, well, thank you, Councillor Thompson. If you want to make sure you're on the list, if you haven't filled out, Linda, hold up the form again, if you would, please. If you want to make sure you're on the list to be notified when it comes back, please fill one of those out, and we'll send you a notice. Thank you very much for coming out. We're just going to take a quick break. You're welcome to stay, of course. Okay, all right, I'll go to you then. Councillor Gardner, you going to join us? Okay, Council, we are on item 2. Let's see, Polo Club. No, not yet. Sorry. I'm going to go to Mr. Ramuno first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, we had our statutory public meeting back in September of 2016, and the applications are to propose a 2 6-story condo buildings, 300 units with close to 400 parking spaces. At that public meeting, we received some comments and questions from the public and council with respect to access onto and from this site, because it would probably be restricted to right in, right out only onto Leslie Street and traffic movements. So following that public meeting, we provided direction to the applicant to conduct a further traffic and access evaluation of options, and they've since done that. And I know their planner, Mr. Brad Rogers, and their traffic consultant, Mr. Mark Jamieson, are here to go through the results of their review and the 4 options that were presented to town staff and regional staff. And I have heard from regional staff that they concur with the option 4, and I think we'll have Brad and Mark just go through their evaluation.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Brad Rogers from Groundswell Urban Planners, and I'm here with Mark Jameson, the transportation consultant with BA Group. I'm also here with the property developers, both Tim Barco and Doug Skeffington from Royal Park Homes. As Marco has mentioned, last September, this council and some members of the public discussed the importance of traffic on Leslie Street and all of the illegal U-turns that were occurring. In the past 6 months, we have focused our efforts on meeting with our neighbors to both the south and the north, and also meeting with the Region of York Transportation Department. We would, I think, like to publicly thank Council for identifying these transportation issues, and specifically thank both Mayor Daw and Marco Ramuno for actually attending meetings with us at the Region of York. We think, or we hope, we have good news for this council tonight when we go through our options. We hope you like the recommended option. It's taken some time to get the region to agree to this option. We still need to focus on some details, but we've been successful, and we're here to update council. And I'd like to turn it over to Mark, who's going to take you through our brief presentation of the 4 options and the discussions that we did have with the Region of York, and what we're all kind of focusing now, which is on the preferred option. The next step for the project from a planning land use perspective is for your staff to come back with a report now that we've resolved what we felt was a very important issue. And then after that, we would be submitting a site plan application at some point in the future, we hope. So I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mark to talk about some of the details of transportation, because that was an important issue. And we're here to answer any questions that council or maybe some of our neighbors, members of the public may have with respect to the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Jamieson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name again is Mark Jamieson. I'm with the firm BA Consulting. We're a transportation consulting firm that has been working with Royal Park and Groundswell on the project. And I'll just do a very brief review of the options for council, and then presumably we'll go through questions at that point. So just very briefly, in terms of a history, we submitted the applications in April 2016, which included a traffic study that was reviewed by both the region and town staff. We had that public meeting in September, and then we heard a lot about some of the various transportation challenges in the area, specifically Leslie Wellington. It's very busy, and then we also heard quite a bit about a U-turn activity that is happening today, in fact, on Leslie Street. In the area of the site somewhere. A lot of it is associated, from what I understand and have seen, with the Tim Hortons Esso gas station on the northwest corner there, with people trying to sort of get into the Tims because you can't actually directly make that left turn. And so council very clearly asked us to look at opportunities to improve access and the design, including looking at connections with our neighbors. Excuse me. So just very briefly for background, it's a 300 unit project. Just remembering that not all of those 300 cars leave at the same time, so we look at a peak hour condition in terms of morning and afternoon peak hours. So, as a residential, you would expect it's very tidal in terms of you have most people who leave in the morning and then most people come in the afternoon. So you're looking at roughly 100 cars in 1 hour coming in or out, and then 20 to 50 in the opposite direction. So just slightly more than one a minute. So, and it's not surprising given the road network that most of these cars are probably going to want to go over to Wellington, down to Wellington. And so given that the region is going to restrict our driveway to right in, right out, and that's because of the proximity to Wellington, it's this, we wouldn't be able to get a full moves access. That's why we were asked to look at opportunities. So here's this is the site plan that was submitted with the application. You'll see the driveway that's been proposed, which is at the south end of the site. So to the south of our site, you'll see is it's labeled gas station. That's the Esso Tim Hortons. And to the north of our site, what you see is Salvation Army there. That's actually now the Northridge Community Church, which is built relatively recently. So I won't belabor the topic, but we met with York Region. We met with owners of the representatives from both properties on the north and south of us. And when we say the south, the Esso station, we're not talking about the Esso station. We're talking about the property immediately to the west, which is a property that will be developed in the near future. And we were discussing a potential connection through that. So we discussed, the primary focus was to discuss connections and ways in which we could increase access. Now it says 3 alternatives were developed, and you'll see 4 bullet points. What happened there was we started with 3 options. We had a meeting with the landowners in the area and the region, and actually developed the 4th option, which you'll see there, which is to modify the design for Leslie Street. So I'll just take you through very briefly the 4 options. We have some pictures, and again, we can answer any questions council may have. So option 1, and you'll see here this is sort of an illustrative version of the site. You'll see the 2 orange buildings in the center. That would be the proposed layout of the Polo Club's condominiums. The building with the white in the north is the Northridge Community Church piece, which has a driveway just north of us that was approved and built and is full moves. And that's one of the other limiting factors, is the church has an existing driveway that now permits people to turn left in and left out and do all movements there. And the property you see to the south, with that little bit of yellow in it, is a site plan application that has been largely through the process, and we've met with Mr. Gamoff, I believe is here, representing that landowner, to talk about access. So option 1 was to look at, you'll see in that red circle there, a connection that would be from the northwest corner of the neighboring site into the parking garage of our building. And the reason it would go directly to the parking garage is because there's some grading elevation differences at the south end of our site, which means that grade for the site to the south is basically equal to the parking level of our property. So you would need to kind of go into the parking garage. You wouldn't be able to go up to the circular loop in the way that you sort of see. So that's why we don't see a sort of a direct connection, is because of the elevation difference. It would basically cut right through the building. So we had a discussion about that with the neighbor, and I'll summarize that briefly in a second. The second option was to meet and discuss a connection at the north end of the site with the Salvation Army Church, the Northridge Community Church. That option would require, we would have flipped the building in the layout, you'll see, so that's basically a comparable mirror image of our site plan, and there would have been a shared driveway access at the north limit of the site that would have been basically taking the church's driveway, moving it a little bit south, and putting it on the property line, so that way it would be shared between both sites. And that option, again, we had several meetings with the Salvation Army representatives as well about that. And that red circle sort of shows the sort of reconfigured access. And the reason this option was discussed is because the church currently has a full moves driveway. We would have been basically allowing for full moves through the churches and avoiding the U-turn issue in that respect. Third option was one that was raised by council as well, was the potential for installing a roundabout on Leslie Street north of the site at State Farm Way. As you see, we have done, in response to this, we had taken a preliminary look at some of the design implications of incorporating a roundabout, and it's important to recognize that two things. This roundabout takes up a lot of space, and the property in the southwest corner that you actually see that's kind of being graded there of the roundabout is actually largely developed now, or in the development process. So a lot of that land that the roundabout would require is actually spoken for. So unfortunately, our analysis concluded that a roundabout wouldn't fit there and was not an option that would be possible. So option 4, and I apologize, this is very engineer-y, but this is a design that the region gave us, which is what they are going to be building probably later this year or next year. So currently on Leslie Street, there are no bike lanes and no sidewalks, so the region is going to be proposing to widen the road a little bit, put in bike lanes, put in sidewalks, urbanize the road, but maintain roughly the same number of lanes. So in terms of what you see, and I recognize that we've flipped the site, so the west is to the upside, and I've labeled Esso and the church, and the dark black lines represent the properties that make up our site. And I think just with this, it's important to recognize that you'll see in the northbound, so going from the left to the right, there is no left turn lane for the church that's planned. So basically, if you're going to the church with the region's base design, you would be turning left from the inner lane where traffic is going through. So the design does not actually contemplate a left turn for the church today. And in the other direction, you'll see that there is a long left turn lane going south towards Wellington, which is there essentially today. The proposed option that we've discussed with the region and we're optimistic about it would be to widen the road a little bit further to include a left turn lane for the church, which would also be used as a U-turn lane for our site. So the idea here would be that you would be able to come north on Leslie, pull into that left turn lane so you're sheltered from the through traffic, and then look north and wait for a gap in traffic before being able to, if you're going to the Polo Club site, make a U-turn, so that way you would then come south and then turn into what you see there, the second, the more leftmost gray driveway represents sort of the access point for the Polo Club site. So from a alignment and safety perspective, you're now being able to accommodate that U-turn traffic in a sheltered area that is out of the way of traffic with proper sight lines to the north. And for the church itself, it now actually gets a left turn lane, which was not part of so there is a benefit for the church itself. And not only that, there would be a larger median in the middle that would allow sort of a refuge. So anybody turning out of the church could sort of, and most people do it this way, you sort of turn out into the middle of the road and then can sort of wait for a gap in the other direction. So it gives you a space in the middle of the road to sit. The preferred option is the U-turn option, and that's because, based on the discussions we had with the neighboring sites, which were all very respectful and very good meeting the neighbors, but frankly, most of them are through the process or have been built, and they perceive the shared access as being detrimental to the site, so they were not interested. So we worked hard to investigate that option, but ultimately we were not successful. The preferred option, therefore, when we talked to the region, they were through multiple meetings about design standards and how we could make it work. We came to the conclusion that the U-turn option was the most best way of proceeding. And there's a lot of advantages to the U-turn. Specifically, it improves the access to the Polo Club site and eliminates the safety of the U-turn issue. But it also improves and minimizes traffic impacts, so traffic wouldn't have to go around the block in terms of going around State Farm and First Commerce Drive, which would be some of that traffic would, if you didn't have this U-turn, would probably have to go around a bigger area to get access to the site. And not only that, there's a benefit for the church in that they get a safer left turn condition. And essentially, in terms of next steps, we had a meeting with the region last week to talk about the design. The region's currently looking at implementing this design into their drawings for the future reconstruction. So they're just reviewing the implications from the perspective of utility impacts and what that extra little bit of pavement would do to the design itself. So that way, with the hope that it would actually just be incorporated into the work that the region will do sometime in the near future. Based on our discussions, we're optimistic. There is some flexibility in that design, so what you see there may be tweaked a little bit, but essentially the general concept of a U-turn lane in the middle of Leslie would remain. Once that's done, we're going to resubmit our TIS that looks at the impacts of that, and then as Mr. Rogers mentioned, we would then anticipate that council would, based on the review of that additional material and the improved option, make a decision on the land use in hopefully June in the near future, with a site plan shortly to follow. And with that, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to come and address council, and I'm happy to answer any questions the residents or council may have.
Thank you very much, Mark. What we'll do first of all is ask if there's any members of the public who are here who would like to come and comment on this particular. Please come down, sir. And if I ask it, and when you get here, if you could give us your name and your address. You have 5 minutes, sir, and there is a clock on the podium.
Hi. Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of staff, and interested parties, my name is Eric Liversidge, and my wife and I are the owners of property at 1426 and 1414 Wellington Street East, and have our residence on the property at 1426 Wellington Street. The subject lands being proposed for the development border our north property line for a distance of 7.26 meters. We obviously have not been consulted in any of these discussions whatsoever. Now, I don't have the privilege of talking to you tonight from being able to review the PBS 17-033. I went onto the town's website to try and find it with the website that Lawrence Cook, with all due respect, published in his letter, and it says the website doesn't exist. So I can't talk to that. However, I did want to bring up just a couple of things in a reference to this gentleman's comment. 300 units does not equate to 300 cars. Already they're saying you should provision 475 units. You're cutting it back to 375. But obviously it doesn't equate to 300 cars. U-turn lanes, as far as I'm concerned, are still unsafe. It's the great American way. I holiday in the south and they make U-turns everywhere, but most places in Canada, U-turns are still an unsafe turn, but I am not a traffic engineer. So I don't want to go over the items which I gave you people in a document for the first planning meeting. I guess what I did want to bring up to you, though, is OPA 30, if I'm not mistaken, suggests that Leslie and Wellington is the eastern gateway to Aurora. Being the eastern gateway to Aurora, I would think we'd want to put something up that is aesthetically pleasing. Right off the bat, I guess I want to draw your attention to the townhouses that have gone in on the north side of Wellington Street between Leslie and Mavronack. The comments I hear, and these are not my own comments, are who built the barracks, and these things aren't too aesthetically pleasing. The next thing I see, I woke up the other morning to hear the sound of a chipper. All of the trees along the berm on the Magna property have now been chipped up and are in the back of a truck. Is this making the Eastern Gateway aesthetically pleasing? And I guess finally, if we're going to put up 2 6-story condos, is that what you people want to see at the Eastern Gateway to Aurora? I somehow don't think so. Basically, as I say, I do share the concerns about the traffic. I do share the parking concerns. I did bring to your attention the fact they're proposing a pathway into the Stronach Aurora Recreation Complex. Where do you think all the extra cars are going to park and walk through that pathway? We're already in trouble with the Marilyn Revers Tennis Complex being up. If you were at the home show, that place was packed and they couldn't even let the exhibitors come in. So we do have a parking issue. And I'd like to again bring that to your attention. Again, as I say, I'm not going to review the items here. but thank you for the opportunity. And again, if I have the opportunity now to review this plan, I will do so and reserve my comments until then.
Thank you, sir. And I believe you've already filled out a form at your last time.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other speakers from the public with respect to this application? Mark, Brad, do you have any comments at this point? Otherwise, I'll just open it up to the public. Pardon me, open it up to council for their comments.
No further comments.
Okay. Sir? Yeah.
I hope I don't need to tell you who I am again. The comment that I had, as per the visual that went up on there, we are that little black space adjacent to 1452. So, as again, we have not been consulted in any of this development. Thank you.
If there's no other members of the public, then I'll ask members of council if they have any comments or questions for either Mr. Rogers or Mr. Jamieson with respect to the traffic design. Councillor Peary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A brief question. It's not specifically to the traffic. Hypothetically, if somebody lives in one of these two proposed buildings but does attend the Northridge Community Church, hypothetically right now there is no linkage to the property that I noticed, so I would hate if somebody had to drive all the way around, or is there going to be a sidewalk, some sort of a connection?
Mr. Rogers, please.
Good question, Councillor. I would hope that they could walk there if they're our neighbor, that's for sure. But there is a sidewalk being proposed by the region on the urbanization of that street. We actually had a lot of pretty good meetings with the church, and they attended the meetings at the region as well as our neighbor to the south. And with all respect, they just wanted to be left alone as it relates to their entrance, and we respect that.
Councillor Gartner, you might want to say up, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. I'm not sure how this U-turn is going to work, and are the cars going to be able to be stacked in that center portion? I can't see it. I just can't see it. Perhaps you can explain it to me again.
Mr. Jamieson, it's probably better for you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. And I know it's kind of faded on this, and let me see if the laser pointer doesn't work on the screen, unfortunately. So yes, there would be a space. Oh, can I borrow? Thank you. Read my mind. So right here, you'll see that is a new lane. So this there is the through lane that'd be going north.
Don't push the button.
Oh, apologize. I had my hand on the button. So as you will see, there's a second through lane. So that would basically be the two lanes that are there today. There's a bike lane. So right here, Councillor, that's would be a left turn lane that'd be capable of accommodating probably about 6 cars or so, which based on our analysis would be sufficient to accommodate both the church and the residents doing U-turns, which would be the two uses contributing to it, plus maybe a few of the Tim Hortons coffee people. But essentially that lane would allow them to sit out of the way, and not only that, I would also add that this sort of hatched area, or what you see some shading, that would be a concrete median that would be extended past the site driveway to ensure that people can't short turn early or basically restrict any turns to happening at this location. So the idea would be that we would make sure that the turns occurred in the safe location where we design it to be.
Councillor?
Thank you. And then in the southbound lanes, there's going to be 2 left turn lanes coming on, 2 left turn option lanes coming there. So the traffic will have to sit and wait. Well, it looks problematic to me. I don't know how it will be in reality, but it looks like it might be an accident site. That's just my comment. Thanks.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments are similar to Councillor Gartner. I just kind of think it looks a bit like a dangerous zone, but I'm not a traffic expert, so I guess my comment would be with respect to the preferred option with the U-turn is that it just seems like a kind of a little bit of a dangerous place to have it, but again, I'm not a traffic expert, so that's just a comment.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Just to follow, with regards to your analysis, does it really focus more on, a variety of different times, or did it look at peak hours, rush hour, for the flow of movement through this intersection?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So our analysis focused on the peak hours as basically with respect to the residents' generation. So that happens to coincide with rush hours from the adjacent road. So morning at rush hour, afternoon rush hour.
And, I'll make my comments when we move to our portion of it, but, I share that concern, going through that intersection on a regular basis. We all know that the Wellington streets are only access to the 404. I've seen on Wellington alone 20, 30 cars lined up, and so I share that. I also work in an area in Markham off of Steeles that has similar situations like this, and I can tell you during rush hour it's a nightmare. You're cutting between cars to get in and out. So I share those concerns about the practicality of what's being presented. And so when we, I guess, get to our portion of it, I'd like to hear from Mr. Ramuno with regards to the region's thoughts on this as well.
Do you have a comment, Mr. Jamieson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So, just two things in response to your comment, Councillor. So, we have been meeting with the region regularly, including the Director of Transportation there, to talk about this option. The issue of queuing going south to make the left turn onto the 404 is something we are all acutely aware of. We've actually done surveys of that 20 to 30 car queue, and that's part of the reason we have identified the potential need for 2 left turn lanes there in the future. And in fact, the region's base design, as you'll see, that hatched area that you see in the mill, when I say hatched, this sort of odd-looking channelizing, which is pavement, but it's striped out. That basically presumes the future potential need for a left turn, an additional left turn that would basically take that long queue and try to put it side by side to give some more capacity to it. The second point I'd point out is that the region, through this redesign process, is making some improvements, and we'll be adjusting signal timings and things like that at that intersection ongoing to maximize traffic flows, and that's something that I'm sure the region will comment on and evaluate as part of this proposal.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if someone's coming out of the Polo Club condos and they want to go north, how would they go north?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that movement would require somebody to turn right to go down to Wellington, and then basically either go west up to the next street past the 404 perhaps, or maybe come back around, basically first Commerce and go back around, or go right and then head through town essentially, and reorient themselves that way. What our analysis shows, though, is like 90% of the people want to go south, so that of the trips that are leaving, the demand that we see for that northbound would be relatively small, and therefore have very minimal, maybe not convenient for those folks, but given that there'd be a concrete median blocking it, they wouldn't have a choice, frankly, and it would be a small impact in the area because it would only be a few cars per hour.
I drive it every day, and I come from Aurora, so I'm going east, and I like going to my Tim Hortons in the morning. And so what I do is I go south on Leslie and then do a U-turn to go north and make a left turn and go in that way. I would guess that that's what most people will end up doing if they want to do it. So if the numbers you're indicating or suggesting would be minimal or not as much, most people, you say, would go south to do their business, but those that would want to go to Newmarket for whatever reasons, be it a club or there's just schools or all that sort of stuff that is up there, they're going to, it's going to be a challenge. There would be no simple way that you've designed for that. So basically I'm saying it's been omitted. It's been omitted. Thank you. Okay.
Any other comments for the proponent? I'm sorry, Councilor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the proponent. The double left turn lanes, how many vehicles would fit into the queue? Do you know?
In that specific design, you'd probably get in each lane probably 15 to 20. So the idea would be to take what sort of is, a 30 to 40 vehicle queue and sort of put it side by side.
That's it for now. I'll save my comments.
Okay. Any other comments for the proponent? Councillor Perry.
Thank you. And my last question. You've got a single straight line coming from the Polo Club. If somebody wants to turn left from the Polo Club, I know there's no barriers. It's always been my understanding that you don't merge into a line, into a solid line. So how do people turn left?
They don't.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor. I'm just making sure I understand the question. So that the single through line, this line that you're referring to right here? No, I'm sorry.
If you look at the division between the lanes going southbound where you have two left-hand turning lanes, you go from hatched lines to straight lines as you're nearing the intersection, which I think just reinforces the comment that you're not supposed to change lanes as you're getting into an intersection. So right where you are, after the two signal indicators that you're turning left, you go from hatched to straight. So if you're leaving the Polo Club, how do you make a left-hand turn if you're going to be going on the highway?
Onto Wellington.
Onto Wellington, and you're going in the direction of the highway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a fair comment. I would note two things. So I think in typical practice, the solid lines there are meant as guidance for the drivers on the major street as they're approaching the left turn lane at speed. And in practice, people turning out of the side driveways basically make their lanes, notwithstanding it would be a weave in traffic engineering jargon to come out and cut across that traffic flow. However, that condition would exist whether this would be, without this U-turn or not. There is a right in, right out that the region is considering, and we're confident we need as a site access. So the idea with this particular design as well, in part two, is that this is a preliminary drawing, and both ourselves and the region have to go through the full design, the detailed design process with this, and you may find that those stripes actually become a broken line up to closer to the intersection to account for that. So there's a level of detail that we still kind of need to go through. This was done to really kind of proof of concept, so to speak, in terms of we're helping the region understand what we were going through.
I think that's all the comments for the proponent. I just wanted to first of all point out that this is a design by York Region Transportation. Is that correct? Or approved by them?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you, this design would be approved by them. This was a drawing we prepared for discussion, but they would we've sent it to them, and they're going to now take ownership of the design through their review process.
And any design here would have to be have final approval from the region?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question through you to the proponent. So, Northridge Community Church had absolutely no interest in alternative number 2?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, frankly, no. They said, yeah, thank you, but no thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much. Appreciate your input. We will close the public portion of the meeting. Someone would put the recommendation on the floor, please, so we can discuss it. Councillor Pirie, thank you. Is there a second? Councillor Marakis, speakers, please. Councillor Marakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, when you look at all the options, I mean, to me, alternative number 2 with Northridge probably would have been the best option. It's unfortunate that that's a no-go. I don't know how much better you can make it, or how much more safer you can make it. I just think it's a problem. This might just be the best solution, but unfortunately, might not be the greatest one. But you know, what do we do at this point? You know, I share some of those concerns with it. I know that going south, and when you're leaving the Polo Club, as Councillor Abel mentioned, and you're going to want to go north, yeah, you're going to do some tricky driving. You know, I think for myself, I wouldn't tell any YRP officials this, but I'd probably just make the UE right at the lights. I'd get in the left-hand turn lane, make the UE, and just go straight up north. And you know what that does is when you're behind a person that does a UE and you're trying to turn left, you always get a little upset and you're honking on the horn. So I could see some frustrations happening within that intersection, within that area. Like I said, I don't know how it can be fixed. I think if the region looked at it and they think that this is the best proposal, I just don't know what we can do to fix it at this point.
Councillor Thompson.
Just, you know, to expand on the comment with regards to access in and out of the property, there's so much development that we're going to be seeing and talking about for Leslie Street, especially, you know, in terms of the employment lands. It is going to see a tremendous amount of traffic, and I'm concerned it's going to create a little bit of a bottleneck that I've experienced in other parts of Toronto and Markham as well. And so, you know, I guess my comment back to Mr. Ramuno is when you're having the conversations with the region, you know, we have to continue to reinforce that not to just look at this application and the movement of traffic specific to this one alone, but what we've identified we want to see within these Leslie lands, you know, both from the Emery property and other employment land applications that we know may come down the pipe as well, because I think you're going to see a significant amount of traffic, and just the way the flow is, I think there's great concerns. And you know, I know that this one's the preferred one, but you know, I look at the roundabout and it reminds me of I think it's Keele or Dufferin. You know, you're going out Bloomington or Keele, you know, and the region seems to be, you know, implementing some of these. I don't know how well they're working, but maybe that's a better solution because it won't create that pinch point.
Any other speakers, please? I brought up the concept of the roundabout, I guess, when this first came out, because we just come back from Europe, and they're everywhere, but the region wasn't in support of that. Unfortunately, well, they're incredibly expensive. There's no question about that. And there's also a land issue in the, especially unfortunately, the timing of the development on the west side of Leslie also impacted them doing that. They would have to swing it off to the east, up onto State Farm, or First Commerce Drive, State Farm Drive, whatever that is there, State Farm Drive. Indeed, to your comment, Councillor Thompson, the region is certainly planning in terms of the transportation master plan what the volume will be on Leslie. And indeed, the double left turn lane is a region standard that's coming in. So they are sensitive to the traffic issues. Believe me, we have those conversations very, very regularly. But certainly, I know the proponent will take those comments back as they go through their process, and I'll certainly take them back to the region as well. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I just need to be clear on this. There were other issues with this application. Those are going to be coming back. to a public planning meeting. We haven't approved this development, have we?
Mr. Muno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we're bringing this back just for information purposes for council, for your comment on the traffic options. Again, there's no decision that have been made yet. We do have the official plan zoning amendment application that deals with the permission for the 2 apartment buildings. But we thought it was just timely to bring this back now, because the region has, and I've spoken to the Director of Transportation Planning, and it was timely because they are able to incorporate this adjustment with the U-turn and the center median into their plans for the reconstruction of Leslie Street, which have commenced and should be completed by the end of 2018. And they were able to accommodate, as Mr. Jamieson mentioned, that U-turn in front of the Northridge Church, which was obviously going to be a challenge for them making those full movement turns.
Councillor?
Thank you. Just to be clear, I remember there were height issues and parking issues with respect to this application. So that's all going to be coming back to council, to a public planning meeting? This whole package is going to be coming back?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sure, I'll take council's direction whether you want me to come back to another public planning meeting or straight to a general committee meeting. We certainly have to report back on the applications and some of the technical issues with the applications and the design of the building. And obviously, we'll also bring it back once we have the final comments from the region on the access design for Leslie Street. So, my recommendation in the report is. And I have options as well, whether council wants me to come back with a complete report to GC or whether you wish to come back to another public planning meeting.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I see it's at GC right now. I would certainly prefer this to come back to a public planning meeting, but we do have a motion on the floor. I'll just vote against it.
No other comments in. Linda, would you please open the vote? Training on the fly here. All those in favor, please raise your hand and vote yay. And then Councillor Gardner, all those contrary. And if you'd vote no with your button. It is automatically recorded. Yes. Linda, close the vote, please. Is everybody, you got everybody? Okay, thank you. That passes 5-1. 6-1, I'm sorry. 5-1. I was correct the first time. Counting is advanced math, and it's okay. Thank you very much, Council. That concludes our items for tonight. May I please have the confirming bylaw? Councillor Abel, Councillor Peary. All in favor of the confirming bylaw, please. Contrary, that is carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillors Thompson and Gardner. All in favor? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming up.